Hello. In previous class we discussed basics of JavaScript. Today basically we're going to discuss that how we generate output using JavaScript. How we can control the content on a web page using JavaScript and throw an output from a JavaScript on a web content. Okay. My name is Dr. Zeeshan Bhatti. If you are for the first time, please don't forget to subscribe this channel so that you receive these tutorials regularly and hit that bell icon so you get the notifications for them as well. So let's begin. Now there are basically three different mechanisms of generating JavaScript based output. Okay, one being using the InnerHTML. Okay, then the second being the Documentwrite, the third being window.alert and console.log. I will demonstrate all of these as we go along. Okay, so basically first thing, for example, if I have a page and if I generate an h1 JavaScript example. Okay, so we have, oh sorry, what happened? JavaScript output example. I think that would be more better. And then we generate a paragraph. This is simple HTML paragraph. Okay, so this is a simple HTML paragraph. Now we have generated JavaScript. Previously we did talk about it, how we can or where we write the JavaScript code. So what I do is, next line I go in and I put in a script tag. I tell its type, not style, sorry, type to be text slash here's my JavaScript code, and I close the inverted quotations. Similarly, I think I start quotations here and then we close this. Okay, so within this script tag now where my JavaScript typically my code would basically go. Okay, now here what I can do is, first thing we use something called inner.html. so I can go into here and I can write h2. okay, the first method for using is something called inner.html tag. Okay, this is something that has been used in Java for a long time to basically inner.html. Now this has been used previously multiple times at various different scenarios where we control the content of HTML tag using JavaScript. Okay, what this inner.html does is it directly intervenes with already declared tag within HTML and changes the content of that tag. Okay, let me show you how we do that. So for example, we give some tag and it can be any HTML tag that you want to use. Then we give a JavaScript based script. Within this script we write something called document.getElementById. okay, get element by id, and then we start, and then for example, let me know, I will just discuss what we can put inside this in innerHTML, and then we can write whatever HTML content that we want to write. So this is a basic syntax. Now in this, first of all, we use something called document. Now document is basically an object. Okay, JavaScript just like Java behaves to a certain extent in object oriented behavior. What it does is now it tries to control your document based on an object based principle. So here basically when we refer to word document, it is referring to your web page as an object. So whatever content is inside your web page is referred to as a document. Okay, within that web page, then it uses a dot operator, which is a connection operator that connects an object and its method. So this is a method, get element by id, a method that will basically get an element based on its id. Okay, so here we are trying to get an element based on the id, and that id is anything. So what we need to do is we need to find out which id we want to control. What we do is we come into the paragraph tag and we write a tag property called id. In this id tag, for example, I can give a test. Okay, now this becomes my id, test id. Now id is basically a Java HTML parameter, HTML attribute that defines an id of this particular paragraph. id is similar to class, but when we specify a class, class is specifically used by CSS. CSS uses the class attribute to specify which style is going to be applied on which tag. However, id is used by HTML to identify each individual tag so that we can control that tag using JavaScript or PHP or for whatever other purpose we want to use it. So id is typically used to control the content of a tag. Class is typically used to control the design of a tag. Okay, if that basically helps. Okay, IDs are used by JavaScript, classes are used by CSS. I think these two major points basically correlate, and I hope you understand that. So where we basically do is we specify an ID. Okay, And now because I have specified ID test here, I will specify test here as well. This basically means go inside the document, get an element by ID called test. So whichever element has this ID, get this id dot inner.html, and then specify basically whatever content we want to specify here. So what we do is, for example, we specify here this is JavaScript response. Okay, so we change the text, and then obviously because we are using JS recommended, we always give semicolon at the end. Now what we have done here is we have told through JavaScript that go inside a document, this obviously web document, wherever it's going to be displayed. Within that web document, connected with this method called getElementById. So in this document, that HTML that is being generated on a web browser, that is going to be generated on the web browser, from that web browser get an element that has id called test. So whichever element has an id called test, fetch that element. Then within that element there is something called InnerHTML. Okay, access its InnerHTML. So when we fetch this element id, it will try to go into its InnerHTML, which basically means that inside this tag, and inside this tag go change the component called JavaScript Response. Okay, so whatever is the content of this InnerHTML will now be changed to what we have specified here. Okay, now once we save this, again we will save this as a normal HTML file. Basically it means that your HTML code is normal code which has JavaScript embedded inside it. Okay, so now what had to happen is that as soon as I turn on the live view, if I can, where is it? Yes, thank you. So what we get now is we get a JavaScript response. Now what has happened is that initially if I hide this code, if I go back into my code, and if I hide this JavaScript and Control X, save it, and if I go back into the HTML, you can see this is a simple HTML paragraph. Okay, so let me just put it on this side, and we come here, let me put this on this side so that we can actually manage these two things equally, so we can get an output and we see this what's going on here. Okay, so as soon as I bring the JavaScript back, save it, now you can see this, the code has basically been changed. That's because we have not put any button or any event that would trigger this change. So first it will try to display this content, then it will display this InnerHTML, and then as soon as it goes back here, it now tries to change the content of that InnerHTML. Okay, so this is one way of changing and generating output using JavaScript, that we try to control HTML tags. We specify some content in HTML tag, and then we change that content at runtime probably, or dynamically based on certain event, and make some decisions here. Okay, and we access its elements. So this is one way of doing it. Second most commonly again is known as H2, and this is called Documentwrite, W-R-I-T-E write method. Now Documentwrite method is again very commonly used to actually write a content on our HTML. So again basic thing is we write some script type, and we give it text / Java script script. Again we have read somewhere that you don't need to write the type every time, but it's always recommended that you do, so your HTML actually becomes more supportive on more web pages, so you do try to follow certain norms properly. Once we have specified the script tag, again remember we can specify script tag as many time as we want. We can include as many as JavaScript as we want, wherever we want. So wherever you need to include the JavaScript, basically you need to write this code here. So for example here and if I write, so InnerHTML is one thing, second is document.write. For InnerHTML we use this as a document.getElementById.InnerHTML tag, and then we use an ID to access an InnerHTML and change its content. Second, document.write. For this simply we say document.write write, and we specify a string. Okay, so this is for example text string generated using document.write write. Okay, Control save as, and we get the string output as we go along. So as soon as you save it, again I'm using brackets, it just gives me live feedback as soon as I save the content. So document.write, what it does is whatever you write appears on the next line. Okay, technically if I speak, it behaves like a block, so whatever you write here would automatically be printed out as a paragraph on the new content on a new line. Okay, so this is one way of producing output, but document.write can actually do lots of other things as well. So in other case, if I come here and I can write for example paragraph. Okay, so I give a paragraph tag within my HTML, and then I give let me close this, backslash My cursor is going haywire. Okay, and if I change the content here, this is paragraph from Java script script. Control S. As soon as I save it, this is paragraph from JavaScript. Now you note that I written a paragraph tags, however there is no tags here. It actually appears as a paragraph here. So which basically means that within our JavaScript you can also specify any tags that you normally would use in HTML. What happens is this, that as soon as you process this content is thrown to the browser, and then browser regenerates it. So when the content is thrown to the browser actually reads this entire area, okay, and then this browser actually prints the output. But then when it reads it, it finds HTML tags, so it converts those HTML tags back into its normal structuring layout. Okay, so the HTML tags also get processed as you go along and as you basically try to print the data. So that's advantage of Documentwrite, and that's why we're trying to use it more commonly to generate an output based on whatever we have available, and we can use any HTML tags we want within our system. Okay, now one other thing that we keep in mind here is, for example, if you use a style tag, you can use that as well. Okay, you can specify style here, you can specify CSS class here, and that CSS can be on an external CSS and can control anything. For now, let me just change the color, colon, and I can specify, for example, red, semicolon. So if I press S, you see there is no output. Now what has happened here is that if you come here, there's one inverted quotations. Let me just maximize this so we can read the text better. Okay, so what has happened here is that we have one quotations mark starting and then another quotation mark. So JavaScript considers this as one string. Then there is some text here which has no connection currently, and then there is another string starting and another string ending here. So up till this point it's okay, but when we write a code in between, now it confuses this, that there's one string, the second string, what should I do with this thing? And that is where error is generated, and that's because of this we now have something called no output. Okay, there's no error. So in order to correct that, basically what we do is, because we need to put this style and this content within our inverted quotations in a typical HTML, so instead of double quotation marks, we would be using a single quotation marks. So this is again allowed in JavaScript or Java in HTML as well. Sorry. So whether HTML or JavaScript, you can use a single quotation marks. It would still be considered as a string. So you can specify single quotation marks here. This would be considered as what we call a double quotations, or simply a string. So what now happens is this: a string starts from here, string ends from here. So it's perfect. Within this string, we have HTML tags, even CSS style tags, and word content, and these gets executed as they are printed on the browser. So this is one second most common way of using our HTML and JavaScript in combination of generating output. Third basically is something called window.alert. Okay, so let me come back here and let's just use H2 and 3. We say window.alert. Okay, now what's window.alert? Window.alert basically generates an alert pop-up window within our JavaScript. Okay, so if we just scroll down and if I just bring it a little bit upwards, so blum, here we go, script script, and we close the script here, and we specify something called window.alert and bracket start bracket close. Okay, and then we specify message here. This is, for example, hello Java script. As soon as I save it, the web page loads, and then we have something called hello JavaScript as a pop-up window. Okay, once you click on that, the HTML window is loaded. Okay, so window.alert basically generates a pop-up window, a message window that appears whenever we have basically it's incorporated inside it. Okay, now what here we have done is, instead of using document, we have used something called window. Now window actually refers to this entire GUI window. So whatever window you have available here is known as window. So this entire GUI frame is actually your window. Document refers to your internal web page that displays the content. It is not concerned with the browser window. Okay, however, the window is actually considered basically based on and considers your browser. So this is where it takes its name, and that's why when I write window.alert, and if I come back here and I save it again, you would notice that I get this message first, because when the system reads this file, it goes into JavaScript and it sees, oh, window. So it first has the highest precedence, in other words. So window gets executed first, window.alert, and my message comes up here, and when I click OK, it becomes visible. So second thing we can do is, sometimes we can incorporate this within our button. Okay, BUTTON button, and if I close this, now what we do usually here with the button is that we specify the code inside the button, and then we drive it with something called onClick event. So what I do is I specify a button here, and let me just close the button. what happened? Okay, this script is not going very well. Okay, backslash not this, backslash button button. Please close this one, and within our button button we have something called on click. Okay, so I say on click, and then let me just bring it here, equals to window bracket start and this bracket close, and then we close this window here. Okay, now what we have done here is that we have specified a click button. Now button again is an HTML code that basically will just create a simple button. On that we have created an event called on click. Now what on click does is it creates an event that what happens when this button is clicked. Within this on click, again a string starts, we say window.alert and the string close. Now this again creates a problem, because same thing is in JavaScript, same thing in HTML. HTML also needs in double inverted quotations to consider an value as a string. So because alert has another string, this creates a problem. So what we did previously, we can do vice versa here. So instead of double quotation marks, I can just use a single quotation marks within my JavaScript now. So window inverted quotations start, inverted quotations close. Within our inverted quotations we have single quotations, that means hello JavaScript, and then semicolon, window closes here, and then I can specify a string called, for example, click here. Okay, this should do the trick. Okay, so next thing we can do is I can just simply remove the script, press S, we have a button here, when I click it, hello JavaScript message appears. Okay, very simple. So now what we've done, we have written this as an HTML, not as a JavaScript, because button is an HTML code. If you write inside JavaScript, now it get confused that what should I do with that particular code. In order to generate the output, we write it either inside a Documentwrite, or in other case we just simply remove the script tag. Now it becomes a standard HTML. Within this HTML we have a button on click. Whatever happens when we click on that button, when that happens, we have written a CSS JavaScript code. Okay, now what this basically means that here we have not written any script thing, but because this is an event here, Java or the browser basically makes an exception, and it automatically without the script tag executes this code, JavaScript code. Okay, so without the script tag on an event, it automatically does that. So there is a little exception that we can get away with JavaScript code without writing the script code within our events, such as on click event. So I don't need to write here. So this is just HTML basically, and on click there is a CSS code, JavaScript code being executed. Okay, so that code is basically being executed without any script tag, and that is sometimes allowed, not sometimes, in this case it is allowed. Okay, hopefully that should explain. So now the finally the last method is called console.log. So let me just come back here and I write h2 console.log. Okay, now what basically this means that you can use console to generate the outputs as well. So for example, within this HTML I can write script, this, let me give a type to it. Oops. type type is equals to text slash JavaScript. Let me close this. Within this I can write console.log. okay, and the message can be for example, hello console. Okay, so as soon as I save it, we have the 4 thing, but there is no output here. That's because the output has actually been thrown at something called Control-Shift-I console window. So if I go into my browsers, let me maximize this, and in my Chrome browser I have pressed Control-Shift-I. So as soon as I press Control-Shift-I, basically a console and editor or inspector window appears. Within this inspector window there are various things that allows us to inspect our CSS and our HTML of our basic web page. So for any web page for that matter, in order to learn, this is what we usually do. We open this inspector, we check what's the CSS and how is it behaving, what's the HTML tags they have used, and so on and so forth. So within this basically you have elements, we access that, we will talk about that as we go along, but there's something called console window here as well. This is like a DOS prompt, or if you have used it, or command prompt if you call it, that command prompt built inside your browser. So each browser, in other words, has a command prompt inside it, that which you can use directly to for example use it for your JavaScript or some other code for that matter. Okay, so you can see this hello console has been printed here. I can also use here as well, so I can say hello. So if I use hello, console.log, and I can use log bracket start hello inverted quotations close, semicolon, I print, and hello is printed. I can also use 5 plus 6, press enter, and 61 is there. So you can see this, we can directly evaluate expressions here as well. I can use variables here, let me just not go into it, and I can do lots of JavaScript code on testing right here directly on the console, and I don't need to save it inside HTML as well. In fact, for example, I can write window.alert and we can generate the window.alert here as well, hello console, and if we go back, press enter, you can see this, we have a hello console window here. So you can do lots of testing of JavaScript code directly on your console as well. You can use lots of output as well, lots of code as well. So I can write document.write, write, and I can say a string hello console document, and then I think bracket are missing, press enter, and you can see this hello console document output is generated on web browser. Now it shifted on the new page because it doesn't know which document you are referring to. Okay, whenever we use an HTML and we embed the HTML with a CSS with a JavaScript using script tag, it knows that I'm using that HTML, and within that I have an embedded code inside. Sometimes if you don't embed the code properly or use a console, now you see this output has been generated on a new, because it doesn't understand that which web page I'm using or what is my current document. Okay, so in this case it's not embedded, it's using console. So when you write document.write, it generates output on the new console. So you can test certain code before you embed it into your HTML directly by being in console here as well. So this is one way of doing it. Okay, so hopefully it explains and makes things easy to understand. If you have any questions, queries, or if you don't understand anything, do leave the comments down below and I will try to help you out. This is Dr. Zeeshan Bhatti. Thank you very much for watching.